Well, today I'm just going to cover the quick overview of the 4x6U controller and the touchscreen. I know I've talked about this touchscreen before in a lot of intricate details, but here I'm just going to go through just the very basics of the touchscreen. What you can see here, this is one of four what I call home pages, which any one of those 4 pages can be displayed at any time while you're doing the normal operation. So while you're doing your irises and blacks and watching your tallies, this screen will always be available as well. And this first mode is what you've seen before. This just basically shows you the iris and black of each of the 4 positions, shows you the tallies up the top here, gives you numerical values down the bottom. So if I just say show up here, if I'm moving the iris up and down, you can see the iris is moving up and down here. Same with the blacks, and of course if I do the same over here, we can wind the iris up and down over here, and we can do the blacks. So blacks up and down, and you might notice that I'm actually pushing the button down, which gives me a finer control, a coarser control, so you can see it a bit more obvious. So there's the iris up and down, and of course you got your normal ability to be able to preview your cameras on whatever you've selected as your router. So we've covered that one before. And over the right hand side here you can select this function, which gives you an overview of all 4 cameras. I've talked about this before, so I'm not going to cover this again, but each of your values, your gains, saturations, Kelvin, contrast, saturation, and that should be shut up there, saturation, hue and Y. Now those last 4 values are what's seen on the expanded CCU, which is just all this over here. Again, I've discussed that in a previous video. So we're just going to move on to now the third display mode. We can just come back by just clicking on the top there. The third we're going to talk about is called Advanced. Now, if you remember in a previous video, you can actually go to the advanced mode by pushing the advanced button on the side here, and then selecting which one of the 4 cameras you want to do to control your gains. And well, I'll quickly show you. So I just say camera A position. You can see that I can you can go through and you can do all your adjustments in here, the different adjustments. But that can also be done without actually having to go into advanced mode. So if we just come out of there, we go to click on advanced here. Now again, all these modes are while you're still doing full iris and black level control over here. You have the ability to change all the settings up on the touchscreen. Now this is different to using the button on the side. That's where it then switches over the knob, all the knob, the black and iris knobs, switches them over to do the specific adjustments, whereas in this mode here we can actually be doing the adjustments while we're still in our normal CCU mode. Now this is just what I call a mode of operation. So you can, and I'll show you again in a moment, you'll be able to do the same with paint. So while you're in this mode here, you can see up on the top here, it tells you what your last camera was that you selected. So as I press any of the 4 buttons on the CCU controller over here, it's changing that to tell you what camera you're actually controlling. So here you can see it's telling us that we are currently looking at the values and controlling the CCUA position. So whatever camera you've got allocated to that CCUA position is what it's controlling. And up here it's telling you all the different values. So you can see over here gain is set to 0, and if you have a look up here, that camera is set to 0. And we come back and we look at the shutter. Shutter is set to 50. The Kelvin is set. This gives you the current value of your focus position. That gives you the current value of your zoom, and it shows you your extended values for your contrast, hue, saturation, and YRGB, and it tells you what the value of your current detail is, and tells you what your bars are. Now, this not only tells you what they are, but it also gives you the ability to control it. So, as an example, you can see here currently gain dB is highlighted. Only one can ever be highlighted. So if I say select shutter or Kelvin, there's only ever one highlight. Now the reason for that is because you see there's a slider down the bottom. Now what this slider does, it gives you the ability to be able to change the value. So you can see up in the top right hand corner there, the focus value is changing as I slide it backwards and forwards. Now the reason the focus is changing because we've got it selected here. So if I want to do the same to say the saturation, we can go select saturation, and then we're going to do this. You'll notice that the slider will move into position, so we can then adjust the saturation accordingly as well. What you can also do with that is that if you want to just reset some values back to default, like for instance the saturation default, if I just open that up over here, you'll see that's sitting on 81, which is what we're controlling here. So if I go and have a look at the saturation down here, while I've still got it selected and I'm adjusting it, I'm sliding it backwards and forwards, you'll see it's sliding backwards and forwards up in here as well. But if you have the value selected here as we have now, and you then touch the value up in here, it will default it. So that again, if you have it selected already and you touch the value, it will then default it. And the same thing would apply to the hue, even though the hue is currently sitting at the default value. Let's just crank that out. There you go, that's the hue sitting at 284. If I touch it, it'll go back to default, which is 180. You can see it's sitting up there at 180. I'll just show it again. I'm just going to drag the slider down here, and then I'm just going to hit it, and it's going to go back to default. So that resetting back to default applies to all these values that change, which is focus, zoom, contrast, hue, saturation, YRGB. Now if you do the same thing, if we say select gain, while we drag the slider is actually moving, and you see the gains changing, because that's broken down. The slider's broken down to being able to give you 4 different values. So over to the right you're going to be getting 18 dB, and then if you push it all the way over the left you're going to get 0 dB. But because there is no default in gain, if you touch the gain, that's all it will do is step to the next value. So there you go, we're stepping through the different values. And of course once you get to 18 you hit it again, it goes back to 0. And that can be seen up here. Here's me stepping through the values. Now that same technique applies to the shutter. You can see the shutter. Just select the shutter, and we can drag the shutter, and it'll go through all the different variations of what's available on the shutter. And but we can also just touch it and step up as well. And I'm only using a pen to try and keep the big fat finger out of the picture for you. Same thing with Kelvin. We can manually switch it up, or we can slider adjust it. If you want to bring it all the way down quickly, you can do that. Focus, zoom are the same. They're variables as I've shown you before. If I just select focus and touch it again, it's trying to zero out, but because it's a servo command, it's returning back to the value because that's where it's sitting. And contrast, as I've shown you, hue, saturation, they're much the same as is the YRGB. Now with the detail, if we select detail, again we can step. Now there's only 4 values in detail, which is off, default, medium and high, and as you can see, as I move the slider across, it's doing that. But again, we can also step up one at a time, so put it on default. Bars is even simpler. Bars can only be in two states, can be off or can be on. Off or on. You see the slider underneath is moving from left to right, so if I actually drag the slider, it'll switch it on. If I drag the slider back, it'll switch it off. So that's pretty much the on-air control of the advanced features. So I'm just emphasising the fact that you can, while you're in normal operation, you're doing your iris and your black levels as you would, but you directly have available to you these controls as well. And then that's extended, over here, that's extended to, if we come back out, if we go to paint mode, we were just in advanced mode, we go to paint mode, this is pretty much exactly the same thing. While you're still doing your iris and black levels, the knobs are dedicated to your iris and black levels, you can then be doing excuse me, you can be also doing your paint controls up here, and you can see by this, again, we can tell whether we're on camera A, B. So if I go select camera D, there's camera D up there. We have the for the four sliders, which is your red, green, blue and luminance, which is pretty much the same as what you see on here, except your luminance is over to the left. I've got it over on the right, don't know why, but that's the way it is. And if I just say we can select whether we're doing the gains, the gammas or the lift. So we just we can just say select lift, and then it's all the values here will also change accordingly. So we go gains, and if I come back here, if I just get the gains, for instance, and start dragging this all over the place, you see all the values down here are changing as I'm rotating them. But you also might notice, I'm going to go to, so I'm on camera D, I'm going to go to camera A. You'll also notice that as I'm doing the same thing, all the values here are changing as well. So those values are mimicking exactly what you're seeing down on here. But one thing you might notice is, you notice these slider values aren't changing, because these slider values are relative values. So it's only when you make an adjustment will the slider value change, and they're relevant to the current value. So let's say here you got the red sitting at 78, as it is over there, red sitting at 78. As you do your adjustments over here, they are going positive and negative of that relative value. So you can see up here, as I'm sliding up and down, that red value is changing as well. So up and down. So you can do your bit of framing up for you. You can do all your very fine paint controls just in this mode here. You also got a ×2 here, so if you click ×2, the value is going to be a lot greater. So if you have a look at the circle, for instance, that's the value is changing in ×2. If I go back to ×1, the values, you can see the changes are much smaller, because when you're on air and you're doing little paint controls, you're just finessing, you're just doing very fine adjustments. So that's basically what that's for. And as I said, you can also do your gammas, you can do your lifts as well. So and also if you let's go back over it again, for instance, if you actually touch on the numerical display, it'll zero it. So you can see it just puts it all back to normal, or sorry, back to default. So that's pretty much what I call the inline controls. There's another one down here that doesn't do anything yet, but I'll think of something for that. And in the past I've shown you things in the setup where you can change your ATEM sources, what the four CCU positions will control for which particular source you want them, and the defaults when the buttons come off, the router inputs if you're using a video hub, or a multi-view 4. It gives you what inputs you want to use. Button mode is whether you want to do toggle or so you got toggle, match, latch. So that just depends on your button modes. See, these are your router inputs. Currently I've got this selected to so you've got router type. I've got it selected to an ATEM aux at the moment. In fact, I'm running a one of those things, what are they called? A ATEM TVS HD. So it's only got one aux bus, so subsequently I can't change to any other aux bus other than the one that's there. And of course the ATEM sources, these are the names that come straight out of the ATEM, so you know what they are. You've got system adjustments here. Again, I've shown you this in the past. These will tell you, you've got things like if you want to change the brightness of your LEDs, you can see the LED brightnesses, and as you got the tally LEDs, which are the ones on the front, power LED on the side. You can change the brightness of those depending on the mood that you want. So if I just say get the tally slider, slide it down, you see they're getting brighter. Slide it up. Sorry, it's getting darker as I slide down. Don't know whether this thing can actually, yeah, so you can see them getting really low, and then I can bring the LEDs up really bright. So you can just set it to what your eye wants. You can do the same thing with the LED on the side. You can increase it or decrease it in brightness. We also have these three controls here give you the sensitivity of the knobs. And you've got courses when you hold down the black button, puts it into coarse mode. When it's not held down, it's in the fine mode. And there's a little graph down here so that once you're doing your adjustment, you can actually turn the knob, and it'll give you an idea of the difference between coarse and fine. So you can see over here, that's your fine adjustment, so it's making much smaller adjustments. The one on the left is showing the coarse adjustment, so it's showing you the more coarse. So you get a feel for what the values are going to be like. You can also set the values here to what you want. So that's the fine. And as I wound that down, now when I turn the knob, you see the coarse adjustments are nowhere near as great, and the fine adjustments are even less so. So that's basically how that works. So you got the same thing with your paint adjusts. When you're doing paint adjusts in paint mode, you can control the sensitivities of the knobs to suit however. So if you're doing, like, if you need to do much greater jumps in color changes, well, you'd send the value higher. And you can do the same with the ped knobs as well. Change the sensitivities. Normally, once you've got them set up, you don't really need to change it, unless the circumstances are changed. So yeah, basically, you've got a status mode here. This gives you information, your software version, your serial number, and what's connected. So here at the moment, you can see it's got a ATEM Television Studio HD. There's no smart scope, and there's no video hub connected. What else have we got in here? System, I showed you system. We did that. Back here, setup. Yeah, so basically that's the quick round trip of the touchscreen in normal operation. So I guess if you're doing normal operation, you probably normally have this on just on advanced mode, so you can have quick access to your gains and your shutters and your color temperatures and whatever else you have. But then if you're getting into the finer controls stuff, you'd probably be sitting on paint and just leave that there. But as I say, you always, in these modes, you always got your iris and your black levels dedicated to your knobs. So thank you for watching, and I've got it under 20 minutes.